Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I'm Lucas.
And I'm Eric.
Eric and Lucas are licensed professional counselors, and Lucas is using his nerd voice today.
I don't know. It just feels like that's the way that word needs to be said.
Because our topic for today is raising nerds.
You just automatically, I heard you pick up that nasally tone in your voice when you said that.
You knew it was coming, yeah.
Yeah, so I listened to an individual on the YouTubes by the name of Matt Colville. He is a self-described nerd who teaches people how to run Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. And he said something that caught my attention about children and parents, which I thought was relevant to our podcast. So I wrote the quote down and put it in our notes, and I had brought it before Eric at the time that I had found it. The quote's from 2020. I will probably need to try to find the video. Hopefully our amazing technical staff can figure out which video it was from. Oops. And Eric had a reaction to it when I showed it to him, and I thought it would be worthwhile discussing. He said, "A nerd is a child whose parents have protected them from social pressures. That is how they have developed their own personal idiosyncratic interests, which are not sports, entertainment, or celebrities." So he's defining seemingly what a, I don't know, standard child might be, or a person with standard interests as being interested in sports, entertainment, and celebrities. And the argument seems to be the only way that you have the ability to become a nerd or someone who has idiosyncratic or any other interests is to be protected from those other things.
Right. And you said Eric had a bold response to this. I'm curious what that was.
Well, your reaction when I initially showed it to you was you're like, yeah, no.
Yeah, that's pretty much my same reaction.
Sure.
Is it's if you had no overly protective pressure or anything from the parent, you still have a child who has different interests that they still were going to have in a general basis. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that may not have occurred to some people. Sure. I still think Matt may be talking about himself to a certain degree.
I very well think that I don't recall him specifically addressing this to himself or to his parents. Yeah. But it seems pretty reasonable that because that was the career he ended up in.
Right.
As a professional nerd.
Exactly. He's calling himself a nerd right from the beginning. And the thing is, if you have a child, let's say you have a boy and he is drawn to knitting, it's not your fault as a parent.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, it's just, yes, people have interests that it may be related to your interests, or it may not be.
Or it may not be. Mm-hmm. But the odds are it's going to be related to their gifts, talents, interests, so forth. It's not because you protected them overly that they got drawn to knitting.
I don't think it says anything in there about overly protective. I think you keep adding that.
Protected, I am, because that's kind of how it's hitting me. You know, parents have protected them from social pressures. Well, if you're just generally protecting your children in a good way for their nurturing and development, then that's normal protection. But if they're developing things that they wouldn't develop because your protection is there, you're overly protecting them.
Well, I think that's kind of an interesting discussion to be had right there of, like you said, there is and should be, correct me if I'm wrong, there is and should be a protection by parents of children from social pressures.
Yes.
What do you think that should look like in a, you kind of implied that like there's a normal way that should happen.
If you're doing everything for your kids and you're protecting them in every way, shape, and form, you're not allowing them to be able to develop independent thought, independent actions, being able to learn the different steps they need to take. Now, it doesn't mean that you don't and aren't in there. Just review some of the cartoons where Baby Bear comes and Baby Bear sees a bigger animal and Baby Bear growls and Baby Bear makes himself big and the other animal's looking at it like, do I barbecue you or do I save you for later? And then suddenly the other animal has a scared look on its face and runs away, and Baby Bear's like, oh, I'm such a big baby bear, and backs up and backs into Mama Bear.
Right, who was behind him, who was 10 times his size.
Came up on that situation. Okay, so Now, if Baby Bear is posturing down a squirrel, it's not a big deal. But if Baby Bear is posturing down a mountain lion, it's a really big deal. Now, putting this over into parenting with our kids, there are going to be certain pressures. Maybe they're more peer-to-peer pressures, and you're seeing it, you're hearing about it, you're giving your child advice, you're helping them to be able to think through the situation, and you're allowing them to step back out and take a hold of that. But then it comes to maybe an adult to your child, and your child isn't going to be able to do what they may have done with their peer, and so the parent is going to step forward more. And now the child is going to see the parent's example as to how to be able to work with that situation.
So I definitely hear you talking about like what one of the elements is protecting your kids from social pressures. And you're definitely making the argument that like there is a level of that should absolutely happen. And then it sounds like your reading of this quote is like, if you're protecting them from these kinds of social pressures in this way, that you may be doing that in a sense that is too big. It might be more. You might be protecting them more than is necessary or is healthy for them.
Right, because they've got to develop that part. And the way I'm reading Matt's quote is that if you're protecting them and even overly protecting them, that's where they're going to develop these nerdy types of interests. And I'm saying, no, dude, no. You have full sports people who love Dungeons and Dragons.
That's
don't
an interesting
have,
dynamic too.
Because I was a person who was into a lot of different stuff. So from Dungeons and Dragons to playing sports to modeling clay to doing photography. I always wanted to learn how to knit, but every time I said, "Hey, can somebody teach me this?" they just look at me like, "Why? You're a boy. Why would you want to learn that?" And so there's a lot of different pieces, I think, to this quote.
So I really think, like, for me, this also assumes some things, which is that if you like sports, entertainment, and celebrities, then you're not then you're not a nerd. Am I saying that right? Yeah.
I'm following you.
And then the other things that, somebody's a nerd because, well, they like computers, they like the science, I like all that. But I feel like a lot of that has very dramatically culturally shifted. So like when I was in school, those were the options. Like they had band, but I mean, it was play sports, it was do this stuff. There wasn't robotics, and there weren't, and now there's robotics clubs, there's all these challenges, computer coding, all of that. SpaceX makes flying cool. And so I feel like just the whole idea of what is a nerd has really changed and shifted. And to some level, I think some kids now look at these kids that are really smart doing this stuff, and they're like, well, I wish I could do that. I don't know. I just feel like it's not, this kind of harkens to a different time era in my mind.
Sure.
Well, I think the whole foundation of the problem is that we have categories.
Right.
Sure.
Nerd is a category.
Yeah.
And so
it comes with a bunch of assumptions and stereotypes.
Exactly. Going up through school until maybe you get into college, and yet still in college, it's kind of like that as well. But you are basically in a category that is looked down on. Now, maybe the higher up you go, the less that begins to hold true. But then you get into the real world and the work, and now it's attached to dollar signs, and now you're not looked down on. Now people are like, I wish I could be Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And so it's like, but at the same time, how many people who were into sports, who were into entertainment, who liked celebrities, how many of them also wanted to do what's considered nerdy stuff?
Right.
But because they didn't want to be considered a nerd we're back to categories.
Yeah.
They didn't do it.
I think that is what this quote is talking about. If you have a child who has these interests, but the social pressures he feels like are to the extent that I can't like chess because my friends would make fun of me, this quote is talking about a supportive family who would give that child the ability to like chess and support them in that interest, even though their peer group is telling them, well, that's nerdy, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and see, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to raise a nerd.
You
Like-
are
like-
actively attempting.
Yeah, like that is my goal. Like yesterday, we got something I was really excited about. I researched trains, like little train tracks for a long time. So we didn't get just a train. We got a smart train that has ways that you can code it so that it goes around the track, and then there's little color tiles, and each one correlates to a computer program, so it'll allow you to make it stop or slow down or speed up, and then you can control it with an app.
And this
so
is for your 1-year-old, right?
Yeah, this is for my 1-year-old.
Right. This is for Josh.
He's watching it spin
Josh
around,
bought a toy.
and I'm programming it, and I'm trying to tell him how great it's going to be, and it will be.
Ladies and gentlemen, Josh has now officially crossed into parenthood.
Yeah.
The place where you buy your favorite toys for
Yes.
your kids.
Exactly.
And it is, you so hope, I've been there,
Yep,
that they
yep.
really will take hold of it, because
Exactly.
that gives you more latitude to buy more of those toys.
Of the things that you
Yep.
were.
Yep.
Yes,
I think
yes.
my wife is
That's
kind of
awesome.
catching on, because she was like, "Do we really need a smart train?" Oh yeah, he's
Does
gonna.
the 1-year-old really
Yeah.
need a smart toy? He wants to eat it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, and the biggest part about Matt's thing is that parents were in that part. And so are there going to be parents who are going to say, what are you doing? You're a boy. What are you doing? You're a girl.
Yeah.
You don't get to do those things.
You can't like trucks. You can't like knitting.
Right.
Whatever.
Yes, absolutely. You're going to have that. But you're also going to have that across the board. You know, you're going to have that with peers. You're going to have that with teachers. You're going to have that with coaches. You're going to have that. We have that in our society.
Yeah.
And if for the parents who aren't, you know, compressing their kids into certain types of molds, those are going to be the parents who are going to be able to alleviate that pressure in the best way they can, you know, and just helping them explore regardless of the pressures that they are facing. So they're not protecting them from that. They're actually helping them learn how to navigate those pressures. When I worked for a fire department, I was a photographer for over a decade for several fire departments, and my wife was a firefighter EMT. I had no interest in doing that. My best friend was a firefighter EMT. They loved fire. They loved blood. They loved doing that. They're like, you should come join us. I'm like, I really shouldn't. They're like, well, why? Why? I'm like, okay, one, you're working with blood, and you don't need me there when you're doing that, because that's just, you're going to have another patient. And they're like, well, what about the fire? I'm like, I don't care about fire.
Yeah.
I mean, but I'll tell you what, I'll take pictures of it.
Right.
That I care about. And the part is I cannot tell you how many different types of adult firefighter parties that I was invited to, and I was going to be fully engaged in all the activities of the party.
By choice or
Well, see, by their decision.
by their decision?
I don't drink, and they were going to be the ones to get me to drink.
So speaking of social pressures, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's my point right there. You're not going to not have the social pressures. And so helping your kids be able to navigate how to be able to resist and refuse and make their own stands for their own things. Those firefighters would go to my wife and say, hey, you know, we're going to get your husband to do this at this party. And she would just look at them and go, good luck with that.
Right. Have you met him?
Yeah.
Well, go invite him and start there. you
Yeah.
know? And so the pressures aren't, in my mind, what results in the different things, generally speaking. If you had those interests, you had those interests.
Right. Yeah. And I feel like some kids, you know, the pressure means more than not. Like for me, I was very interested. Like my dad was definitely like a sports guy, right? So they wanted me to play t-ball. I was doing all the stuff. But I'm out there like looking at the lights and the field, wondering how they're wired. And I mean, you know, my dad's wanting to set up, you know, stuff in the backyard to do pitching. And I'm like, well, hey, is there any way we could like wire a scoreboard? And so I
Can
just
I rewire the pitching machine?
Exactly. Yeah. So I just constantly gravitated towards that. As a child, I feel like my parents probably pushed the sports stuff too far because I definitely was like, okay, I could have used a few less years of that. But to their credit, they actually dropped me off on Saturdays at a ham radio thing I wanted to go to, where I learned to pass the ham radio test. Nice. And so I don't think for my dad, that wasn't like his, yes, I want my son to be a youngest ham radio operator. You know, he would have much rather me play football, but they realized at some point, like, yeah, this kid,
it's not going to happen.
It's just not going to be. I mean, they just, I've seen some of the videos, but I mean, they're saying I'm out in the outfield, and I'm like picking the flowers and blowing them and doing all that and paying no lick of attention. And they're like, here comes the ball, you know.
Whack. Yeah. There goes the ball.
You're right. Here comes the ball. Here goes the ball.
When I realized my son, it was just not going to happen, is when he's in, I think it was grade school basketball, and the ball comes to him, and rather than shoot it or pass it, he just started to run. He made it a game of chase, and fortunately, he's the fastest one on the court. And I'm like, yeah, this isn't gonna happen.
So he grabbed the basketball and just took off.
Nice.
He's like, chase me.
Oh my God.
And you know, and it's that same thing, because I'm huge with sports. I love sports. And he will. So how that has worked for him is that he will watch a football game with me, and he'll be mildly interested. He decided that he would support Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay.
Whereas am LA Rams.
Did he throw a dart at a dartboard? Like, where did he come to this conclusion?
He just was in the hat shop and said, I think I like these colors.
Yep.
That's
and
a cool
they just
logo.
happen to be big rivalries. And, you know,
perfect.
So we've been out at stores before and both wearing, you know, the hats of our teams.
Yeah.
And strangers will just stop and go, oh, game night must be good in your family. And I'm like, well, it is, but it's not like what you think.
Right.
Not like what you think.
Yeah. And that's okay. You know, there are other things that he really enjoys and really likes to do. And it's, you know, it's not about, and that's a hard part for parents, is that, like with your parents, your dad, he really wanted a football buddy.
Yeah.
But what he realized is, okay, my son is going to be cut a different way, and we're still buddies.
Yeah. Yep.
I would wonder if there's a scenario where, like, you have a family of, we'll call them nerds, right?
Yeah.
You know, dad's a computer science tech or whatever, and then the kid grows up wanting to play football,
right?
And the conflicts that causes.
Yeah.
Of like, you can't do that. You'll hurt yourself. You'll get a concussion. Wear knee pads. We're going to wrap you in bubble wrap.
Wow. That was my first game in middle school. That was my mom right there.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And when my bell got rung and I was down, my mom's like, that's it. That's what I said. That's what I knew this was going to happen. You're never doing this again. And my dad's like, okay, you go over there.
Yeah.
You come here.
Yeah.
And my dad was not a big sports fan, but he knew what to do.
Yeah. And see, I was always like a big guy with big shoulders. And so when I was getting close to where I could do junior high football, the coaches and stuff, they were like, oh man, you got to join football, come out, do the whatever.
Great lineman.
Yeah. And so by that point, I really just wasn't that interested, but I decided, okay, I'll just give this thing one try.
We'll try it.
And you know, it made my parents very happy. And so I remember we went out, I got all the equipment, I got all the stuff. I wasn't pleased that it was like even kind of dirty. Like I remember just, you know, it's just like, oh, that stuff has some grass stains on. Anyways. So I go out there for the first week, and they're like having us all bend over, and then they're kicking us. And I'm just like, why would anyone want to do this? And so I literally went after 1 week and joined the choir. And I came home and I said, okay, I gave it a try, but I'm now in choir. So I'm sorry.
Your dad's like, is that the full contact choir?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I want to see that sport.
Yeah, that could be
I've
interesting.
tried to invent it many times. It's not an easy thing to get to take.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny because you're talking about, you know, football. You know, when I was a freshman, you know, and playing football, I was 120-pound right guard. I could move the big guys. I learned and dedicated myself to know how to get center of gravity and how to just take people wherever I wanted, unless they were, you know, kind of 300 pounds.
Yeah.
And then it was a whole different story. But then I'm on the weekend, playing Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm-hmm.
or I'm working with my stamp collection,
Yeah.
or I've got a comic book collection,
Yeah.
you know, or I'm working with leatherwork and photography, you know, and so there's protection from the social pressures.
Yeah.
You know, if it's overly so, and it's such a hard statement to work with in a way, because you don't know more of what Matt is really trying to talk about in just his couple of lines. Involved parents will help their kids be able to navigate the pressures that they face. And as parents, and my dad did it, he had at first a closed environment to where what happened in the family stayed in the family, that old ridiculous nonsense. But once he realized how acidic that was to me, he removed that and just said, listen, I'm just asking, I mean, you talk to whoever you want to, and it wasn't a bad home, but he said, I'm just asking that eventually you might come talk to me. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. That eliminated all of the pressure and gave me more of a choice, you know, which is a part of this, is you're allowing your kids to explore their choices. They want to be in the choir. They want to do D&D. You know, they want to look at different things that they're interested in as they're exploring who they are.
Right. What was kind of fascinating about the whole choir thing was in the 7th grade, you only got one elective. And so that's why I had to pick. But then the next year, people got 2. And turns out there were a lot of guys who were on the football team that also joined the choir.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Well, and who's that popular actor now? Is it Henry Cavill?
He's one.
Who was the guy in The Witcher? And then he's also
Henry Cavill.
And then he's also a big Warhammer nerd.
Right.
And people look at him and kind of like, well, there's a discrepancy. This big buff manly man also plays with teeny tiny plastic figurines.
Yeah.
Right. That's the kind of thing we're talking
exactly.
about.
Let's go to another great big guy, but you're going to have to help me with his name. He's the host for America's Got Talent.
I'm terrible with celebrities, Eric. I'm going to fall flat
Josh,
on this
you
one.
got the computer.
America's
Got Talent.
Host for America's Got Talent.
Uh-huh.
All I can think of is Howie Mandel, and that's not who you're talking about.
No, he's a judge.
The host.
The
I
host.
mean, are you talking about like Simon?
No, Simon's
the
a
host.
judge.
The host, the guy on the stage with the microphone.
Oh,
Yeah, everybody out there's going, it's this guy.
I know, right? In the comments, please help us out, because this is not our jam.
Host of America's Got Talent.
I mean, wasn't it like Nick Cannon at one point?
Was Nick Cannon.
I
Yes.
don't think that's who you're talking about.
No. It's a much different personality and a
This
much
has-
bigger body.
Okay.
14 rows, one of which says Regis Philbin and Jerry Springer. So I don't know if this is accurate information.
Give us
here.
the point in any
Okay.
case.
The point is, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. I'm sorry. He's a huge guy, and he plays a flute. And he plays a flute extremely well. So he's very, very talented at playing that. And you see him, and he's like this big bodybuilder type body guy. You know, and it's when people first saw him and found out, they're like, "What? You play flute?" You know, and that just gets us back to our categories.
Terry Crews.
It's Terry Crews. There we
Okay.
go. You saved us, Josh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was
when
never
I added
in
flute to the search.
There you go.
America's Got Talent flute host.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And so the categories are what is stifling.
Yeah.
You know, and that's my biggest thing with, you know, other than blaming parents with Matt's statement, is that it reinforces the categories. And those I think we should burn to the ground.
Yeah.
Just be a person.
Yeah.
That sounds like a really good summary of what we've been talking about with this, because this quote implies that there's, quote, normal kids and there's nerds and there's whatever.
There's something wrong with the nerds.
And the argument that it sounds like we all essentially agree on is like, be a good person, and I'll be a parent that allow, and by good person, I mean like, I don't know, in all the ways, right? Well-rounded, following your interests, right? And then as a parent, try to raise your child to give them the opportunity to allow their interests to be whatever it is that they are, whether that's playing flute or football or choir or, you know, technological wiring.
Exactly. So, well, I'm going to continue my efforts to raise a nerd.
There you go.
But we're not going to call them nerds because we're burning them down.
Just
He's gonna
watch.
Be a train engineer.
No,
train engineer.
Just watch. He's going to be the one into football.
Right.
That's
exactly.
right. Exactly. Yeah, that's probably
He's
going
like,
to
no, Dad, I want to do wrestling and boxing and taekwondo.
And don't worry, I'm going to sing them a good note after I defeat them.
There you go. But if I can solve it with my smart train, at least we'll see. So, all right. Well, I think that'll wrap up this episode for us. But make sure you download our app. Search Empowering Choices Parenting in the Apple Store or the Android Store. And then you can go to empoweringchoices.community. We have a subscription service full of classes, courses. We have a parenting manual. There's all kinds of stuff in there. So make sure to check that out, and we will see you on the next episode.